Hola!
I'm Johanna.
And I'm Denisse.
Welcome and bienvenidos to the Love and Evolve podcast, where we discuss topics surrounding holistic wellness such as mental, physical, and spiritual health. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer.
Love and Evolve Wellness Podcast is a community space for conversation, growth, and healing. However, it is not a substitute for professional mental or medical care. El podcast no sustituye ayuda psicológica o médica.
We encourage you to seek resources and support in your community. We love you, los queremos mucho, and you matter to us.
Thank you for listening, and on to the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome from wherever you are once again to the Love and Evolve podcast with your hosts, me, Denisse, and
Joe. Hi.
Hello. Today we are going to have a kind of like a table talk, kind of a talk. You know how Jada Pinkett Smith has her table talk. I know that's not the title, but I can't think of it right now, and I'm so sorry. But we're going to have a conversation entre amigas, a conversation between friends. And we've been wanting to talk about for a while colorism and racism and privilege that we have experienced ourselves. And I say that we have experienced, like me, Denisse, and Joe as a person, because we are not here to speak about your experience, because how could I possibly, right? I don't want to assume that I would know what your experience is like. And certainly we wouldn't want to assume that we know what a community experience is like. So hopefully with us sharing our truths and our stories, that there is some connections, something that you feel that you can relate to, that makes you feel like, yes, okay, I feel heard on that. So that's what we're here to do today. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Joe?
No, I think that was beautifully said. I think that we've sort of been, processing this for ourselves on our own and really thinking about how we want to bring this up because it's such a delicate conversation. And, at least for me, when I look within and I check myself for the areas of privilege that I have and the areas that I still need work on when it comes to cultural awareness, it can be overwhelming, and sometimes we might even shame ourselves. And what we hope to do is really just open this up for increasing your awareness. And if this resonates with you in any way, that you let us know and that you feel seen and heard and connected.
Yeah. Joe and I have had time to kind of talk about it and at other times and process through a little bit. And I feel like that is a big part of this in processing, that it's important to talk with friends or family about your experiences, and through that to gain understanding, not just of your own experience, but of someone else's. And to reiterate that, as we do in our intro that we mentioned, the Latinx community, I mean, that's also very a simple kind of a label for a very complex community. And I'm sure there are other ways, but other ways that people identify, but that we couldn't possibly understand all of the communities and all of the intersectionalities. So this is a bit of our experiences in processing through and learning with each other about things such as colorism, privilege, racism, and anything else that may come up related to that. So is there an area that you'd like to start in, Joe? And is there something that's calling out to you right now?
Yeah, I think whenever I begin to step into my feelings and my thoughts around this topic, I always find myself asking, what is my area and where am I privileged? And this doesn't mean you should all start this way. This is just what helps me getting into these conversations, because I want to make sure that I'm aware of where I might be having blind spots. And if I'm not aware, that I allow myself the opportunity to be curious and just empathic with somebody else's experience. And sometimes it can be a lot easier to go into this autopilot state of, well, I need to be heard, and I need this and I need that, or to be triggered. And I always try to start with the intention of like, what is this person trying to share with me, and what is their experience? And also remembering that mine is valid as well, but with an open mind and an open heart.
Yeah, and just because we've had a discussion previous to this, I don't know if this is something that you want to share, that you're talking about sharing a story and feeling heard, and that someone isn't then imposing themselves onto your words, your voice, and trying to then shift the light on themselves. And does that sound about right in how I heard what you were starting to talk about?
Yeah. So I had an experience, and I'm being very delicate because I want to be respectful, for what happened. And so when I was working as a former therapist and I was receiving my training, one of the things that I care deeply about is how therapists, people of color, myself, are coming into these spaces and working with our community, and how necessary, one, it is to be representing the community in being a part of this therapist role. That's the first one. And then the second one, to not just assume because, okay, I'm Latino, so therefore I know everything I need to know about being Latino or Latinx, and then have that create biases or assumptions or generalizations about the community that may actually be hurting your therapeutic relationship. And so as I'm saying that, that was something that, and today still continue to be really passionate about, is, if I'm in this wellness space, where are the areas that I still need to learn more about? Because if there's anyone out there that thinks, well, I know everything I need to know and I'm now culturally competent, it is not true, because it is an ongoing journey, and people change, communities change. And so to assume that, okay, well, I've been certified in this, so now I'm the expert. No, we're all students, and that's going to continue to evolve. And that's also important to me. So when I started my clinical training, I was really seeking for a place that would provide this teaching, advocating for our communities, or when we have blind spots, that it's mentioned like, hey, is it possible that you might be generalizing here? Or and that we could be open about those blind spots and come into it with a place of, I'm here to learn and I'm here to grow, and have a conversation. And so when there were moments like this that came up, where I would notice that a practicing therapist might be having biases about their client, or missing something because there is a lack of knowledge in that particular culture, or based on what they shared, then I would bring up questions surrounding that topic. So I remember, just how passionate, I guess I'm sharing all of this to say, I'm very passionate about making sure that we don't make assumptions about cultures, that I myself don't make assumptions. And if there are blind spots, that I'm able to work through them and continue to grow in that area. Just taking a breath because this is a lot.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, I'm thinking about, so you mentioned how culture or certain practices or cultural traditions may come up in a therapy session, and a therapist might have biases or assumptions based on those, and that there are layers. So that can be a Western assumption, and that the world does not revolve around the United States and our perceptions, that there are other ways of living and being in a culture other than what is experienced here. And what's that thing when people say, oh, I don't see color? And that it can be so dangerous in the therapy space and I've seen this happen, of this thought of, well, I'm a healing person, therefore I heal people, so I don't see color because I'm healing.
Ouch.
And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I felt the dagger, like, oh.
Yeah. So that's I've actually seen that, and I've heard those kind of words, and it's like, oh gosh, no, like,
yeah, because it's the dismissing an entire person's experience. Like, okay, if you don't see color, then you don't see me. And if you don't see me, how can you possibly claim to understand my experience?
Right.
Can you hear my kiddo in the background?
I can. He sounds like he's having fun.
And so, as you know, I am recording, and I am a mama bear, so you might hear my little kiddo in the background playing with his dad right now. So, life. So, yes. And okay, so coming back to this, passion of wanting to make sure that, one, I continue to have my learning cap on and be open to receiving other perspectives, as well as honoring my truth and validating my own experience. And so as I say that, I'm thinking back to this this place where I was working, and prior to being in this space, I had been struggling to find my voice, to figure out how am I going to advocate for my community. I've always felt very passionate about that, but I was always so afraid. And I'm sure that a good chunk of that fear came from the experiences I had when I was growing up. My parents were immigrants, so I saw them being discriminated often because of the color of their skin, because of the way they spoke English. As a kid, it's heartbreaking because you can't help but wonder, well, why are my parents being treated differently? And they're not causing any harm, and they're putting all their hard work, and yet they have to put up with being mistreated. And so that was really tough. And I like just remember feeling like I wanted to speak up. And then at the same time, there was, this feeling of like, well, if you do speak up, then you're putting your family at risk. If you speak up, they could get deported.
Scary.
And so it's almost like the way that it felt when I was a kid, and, even in my teen years, was we almost had to just take it, because if we didn't, I could risk losing them, and that's just so terrifying.
Yeah.
And then, remembering back to when I was in high school, like I was one of very few, people of color in my IB class and in my AP classes. And that came with its own challenges. And I remember like wanting to speak up because, especially for my English literature class, I love books. You know this. We love books.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I was like taking notes in my books. And whenever it came to having analytical conversations about the text, I had so much to share. And I remember raising my hand multiple times, but it felt like I was never called on. So I was already struggling to have my voice be heard in general, and thinking about all this fear, what happens when you do speak up, or the risks of speaking up. I didn't know it then, but I would then hesitate more and more and more. And I remember having this writing exercise where the professor asked us to do, I can't remember all the details right now, but we had to write a poem that was in parallel to one of the poets we were studying. And I remember this is my perfect opportunity to voice what I want to voice without it being very obvious of what I'm saying. And of course, I remember describing metaphorically the classroom, and feeling like I couldn't really speak up because I was different. And I remember the teacher asking me to stay back after we had submitted he had reviewed it and everything. And he asked me to stay back. And I was like, oh my God, am I in trouble? Did he figure it out? And he asked me, he's like, do you feel like I can't call on you? Like, do you feel like I'm not giving you space to share? And he was a white male. So I was frozen. I was like, I don't know what the intention is here. I don't know if this is coming from a place of I can improve. And this was the first time I was speaking up indirectly about it. And I didn't say yes or no. I was like, it was creative. It was an art piece. I was like trying to avoid it. And that was the best that I could do in that time, was to voice how I was experiencing this through art without it being direct.
So what happened? Did you get called on anymore? Did anything come from that?
Sadly, no. Kind of things stayed the same. I remember feeling shame when I was being asked about it, which is probably why I didn't directly say, yes, this is why I'm doing it, because you're not calling on me. But I do remember all of the kids, people of color, we would all sit kind of in the same corner. And we were really, I felt like, even though we weren't all close friends, I felt solid in that corner.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And isn't that interesting you mentioned this teacher being a white male and how that influenced you? You know, he's kind of standing in a bit of a frozen state of what, I don't know what I can say or how to interpret the situation.
Yeah.
And that kind of speaks volumes as well.
Yeah. Whoa, I went all over the place. Went all the way back to high school.
This is how this is. It affects all areas of our lives and how we present ourselves as a student, how we engage in social interactions, you know, interpersonal relationships in the workplace. You know, the thing about, I put my professional face on and then when I get home, I relax and I'm myself, you know, all of these different masks or hats, however you want to refer to it. It's just in all areas.
Yeah. Continuing on this path, I then, when did it happen? So then I was, you know, in this clinical setting, and I remember multiple times being called by a general Latinx name. You know, like everyone's known by this Latin name usually, or Latinx name. And the assumption that was made was that we were named that way because we looked the same. And I remember when it happened the first time, I was like, okay, well, maybe it was an error. Like, it happens. People forget people's names. Like, I remember trying to justify it right away. Like, maybe it was just an accident, or it happens to everyone. It happens to the best of us. And I let it go. But the reality was that I felt incredibly nauseous. I felt this unwavering feeling of, it's almost like when you buy something, and if there's a word for this, please share. When you buy something and you know that you shouldn't have bought it, and you just feel kind
buyer's remorse.
Yeah. So it was similar to that, where like I justified it, but I feel like that wasn't one that I should have justified.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It just made me feel so sick. But I was like, no, it's fine. It wasn't fine. It was not fine, everyone. It was not fine. And then it happened again. And again.
And when it's your name, I feel so strongly about names. And I mean, it's it's your name, right? And if anyone can't pronounce my name, I mean, I so appreciate when someone asks me, because I have 2 S's in my name, before even assuming, or if they do and make a guess, then they're like, oh, hold on, can you please let me know, did I say that correctly? Or how is it that should I pronounce your name? I appreciate it 100%. Than somebody guessing or making fun of my name, or assuming that it's something else based on how I look.
I think it was all of those pieces combined. You know, the second time that it happened, I was like, I have so much going on. It was like finals. I was stressed. I was like, I do not have the bandwidth right now, and I'm not going to address it right now. And so I let it go, and literally let it go, not, you know, emotionally, psychically.
Let it go. I can't help myself. I'm sorry, but please continue.
No, I appreciate the humor. This is tough to talk about.
It weighs heavy.
I've told this story a few times. You know, I've tried doing my healing around this particular incident, but you know, these things stay with you. It's a part of our identity. And, you know, it takes time to really heal those wounds. And I want to say forgive some of this stuff. More on that particular piece later.
Yeah.
But for this topic, I remember just being like so guilty because I told myself I don't have the capacity to address this right now, because I felt like I was betraying myself in some way. Like, you know, like, you're not speaking up and this is not okay. And because such a big part of who I feel I am at my core is an advocate. And I'm like, I'm trying to be an advocate for my communities and I can't even do it for myself.
Mm.
And so I felt so much shame for that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would share with all of you in terms of this moment where I was feeling shame is I want to offer the possibility of us giving ourselves permission to take a step back and not speak up in some moments. Like, if we don't have the capacity, and please, this is my own opinion and my experience, you know, I feel like in some ways that's placing boundaries for ourselves. If in this moment I do not have the bandwidth to do it, to be kind and gentle with yourself. And that's where I'm at right now, where I was feeling that shame. And at that point, I was not kind to myself. I felt guilty. I felt terrible for not voicing that. And I still had the intention to talk about it, but I wasn't ready in that place. And I think sometimes it can feel very guilty when we're not constantly fighting the fight. And I would like to offer that there are times where we fight the fight, and there are times when we need to recharge so we can continue the fight. Because if we just burn ourselves out, we're not going to win.
Yeah, it sounds like assessing what you can do with what's going on in your life in the moment, and that if you're saying right now, it's not within my bandwidth, that does not mean that you're throwing in the towel.
Mm-hmm.
It may just be that particular situation in that time, and that you'll step back in when you have recharged and regrouped. And also sounds like meeting yourself with compassion based on that time of your life. In that moment, you were working through things, right? And now you're in a different place where you've been able to process, and you're able to step in to advocacy in a different way than, and maybe in a way that you hoped you were able to back then, that now you can. So honoring that process. And I feel such even a release in hearing that as well, because I have this constant battle of finding how to process in my way, in a way that seems to not match up with the larger society, and that there's always got to be an answer, a movement happening right now, and something happened, react this way. And I'm the person who is typically overlooked, if I'm going to put this in a classroom situation, who's overlooked because it takes me a little longer to process and to give an answer and to come up with an action. So the people in the front, you know, they're the ones that are getting called on, or they're shouting out the answers, right? And it looks like they're the leaders, they're the ones who have it all together. And I'm in the back going, hold on, I'm still trying to catch up, and feeling really poorly about myself that I'm not able to catch up or to keep up. But now I feel that I can see that I have value in, or I do have a place in taking my time, that I don't always have to have an answer right away. I don't always have to have a reaction, and that I still care, even if it may not look like I do, because I'm still thinking and I'm still processing and I'm acting in other ways, as opposed to this, I've got to be going, and give me the answer, give me, which is quite exhausting.
Yeah, I wanna honor that, because, you know, we can feeling like we have to compete, or feeling like, you know, that whatever is happening is the standard. And if we get sucked into that concept, we can lose ourselves in that, and lose our gifts, and lose what is powerful within us, in feeling like, oh, you know, like, well, I want to say something too. I know that what I'm going to share is valuable, but they beat me to it. And so I hear you really saying, like, I know that I have a place. I know that what I have to share matters.
I could feel a bit of myself in you back then. I mean, it's how I am trying on for size, I guess. And how would I be processing through, like, what would I have done if I were in that situation? So then where were you at? Because I'm really enjoying this story, and I want to know where it's what's next.
Yeah, so before I continue with the story, there was something that came to mind, because it was a different place where I was then and I am now, and I feel like I've accumulated all these new resources and tools, and something that I would tell myself then. Oh, I'm getting emotional. Connecting with that version of me, I would suggest for her to look right at what is happening and say, I see you. I know what you're feeling, and what you're feeling is valid. We will get to it, and just let it exist, because I think what was happening for me then was that I didn't feel like I could actually stop that feeling, or not stop it, but like it felt like I was ignoring it in some way. And potentially maybe acknowledging your feelings that come up and addressing them, like saying, I see you. I'm going to address you in due time, will help allow us to continue doing what we need to do without carrying all of that guilt and shame as we move through it.
Yeah. And it may seem like, oh, I'm not doing anything right now. And yet that internal processing is something, because it's getting the gears moving, they're turning, it's thinking about the next step and how can I possibly face this in a different way, or how can I strengthen myself so that I can be prepared to then respond in a way that will not have me feeling this way. So it may not outwardly look tangible or something that you're able to see, but it's happening on the inside. And I do want to highlight that that is also important. I mean, I'm hearing you thinking maybe at the time you thought, oh, I'm not quite doing anything. And I know a bit of the story, so I know that you do end up doing something, but that there are also these internal steps that are happening that is also so important and part of making change happen for yourself and potentially other people.
Wow, yeah, what you're saying is resonating, because I'm recognizing that I was our bodies absorb whatever emotional processing we are doing. And although in that moment it felt like to me I was just not doing enough, the gears were moving and my body was still processing. So I guess it provides me with the space to be forgiving with that version of me then, for what happened and how I responded. So back to the story, I, at this point, I was like, third time, I can't take it anymore. Finals have now passed. I've now allowed time to process. What am I going to do about this? Because this is not okay. This is not okay on so many levels. This is not okay because it is now blatant that there is a lack of awareness. And in a clinical setting, as people who are teaching other clinicians how to be culturally aware and how to come into this space of healing, when I can't even think, help me out here, Denisse, the words I'm trying to say here, I'm struggling.
Bypassing, gaslighting. I mean, all these other words come to mind, these just clear blind spots. And that thinking that once you've arrived, right, you've got these credentials, you've gone to school. And I'm from the school of thought of experience over education sometimes, because that education, like my husband likes to say, he's like, I know a lot of dumb people who went to Stanford. Just because you went to Stanford don't mean you know everything. I mean, and I think what he means.
No hate on Stanford.
No, I know this is not hate on that. But what I'm saying is that a certification or this big name education is not this stamp of I know it all and that now I'm in the clear. And you talked a little bit about that earlier on in your story. I think this is where this person, they're in a supervisor role or a leader, correct? Yeah. That now it's like, oh, but I know, and I know enough to lead this. And you're coming in thinking that you are going to get support. Sonia, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. Whew. I'm getting all fired up again. I mean, I think I've always been fired up when it comes to this topic, but there's just a moment where it's like the lighter just lights up. And so, yeah, this third time I was like, I'm going to speak up about this. This is not okay. And when the third time happened, someone witnessed it. Someone who, well, two people witnessed it. The person that the name was confused with, myself, and the person who was leading, or the person who was in the leadership role, and who was guiding discussions surrounding how we must be culturally aware and culturally competent and why that's important. And of course, you know, I was like, well, it's been expressed that this is a safe space and this is where we work through these kinds of things. And, you know, I was like, we did a check-in. Everyone typically says how they're feeling, how they're doing, and everyone validates the experience. And then we move into the clinical stuff. But at this point, I just remember like it just happened. So I was like, I want to talk about what just happened because this isn't the first time. And I think that something needs to change. I really need to process that. And it was expressed initially that if anything like this did come up, that we should bring it up because it provides such rich clinical growth and awareness. And I truly believe that, by the way. And so anyways, so I've been disclaimed. I've been told that this is something that we do need to do. This is part of the work. This is what we're doing. And then I did. And I remember being able to pinpoint the people in the room when I was sharing what had happened and explaining this, who was like, oh yeah, that's happened to me. And there was something about that where I felt so connected to these individuals because it was like, so it's not just me. Because there was a point where I was like, am I making this up? Like, is it actually happening? And you know, part of that dismissal of it and justifying it, and but then it just happened so often and it became so blatant. And then in this moment where I'm sharing and people are nodding their heads and saying, yeah, that's happened to me, or it was sad, but also empowering to be like, it's not just me. Like we can do something about this.
Right. It's not all in my head, right?
Yeah. Like I'm not making this stuff up. And it can sometimes feel that way, you know, when we're discriminated or when we're gaslighted or when we're, you know, all of the above. So I shared this, and I also noticed that some of the people in the room's energy changed, and most people in the room were like, wow, that's so hard. And you know, our clinical responses, right? Like that must have been very frustrating, or how painful, you know, all these things. That's happened to me. And there was someone who said, well, maybe it was just a mistake. It happens to everyone. I'm not quoting this person directly because it was a long time ago. And as we know, memory can be tricky. And also when it comes to traumatic events, because whenever you experience discrimination or someone, you know, racially targeting you or whatever it may be, like, you know, we know within us when something is off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
You're mentioning that somebody was saying, oh, maybe they didn't mean it, or maybe it was a mistake, maybe, you know, implying that, it sounds like implying that you then misinterpreted. Your experience of this is essentially wrong, kind of invalidating what you're feeling, when it's not about the other person and what they may have done or not done, but what is then the impact of how you received this in your body. You're feeling this, your mind's been occupied by this, clearly, you know, you're stressed out about this. So really it's how are you experiencing it? And that was completely overlooked. And it was then shifted towards, well, how about this other person?
Mhm. Yeah, what I do remember clearly, and this is a quote, I'm just trying to be devil's advocate. Oh, like, when this happens, when we're having conversations about racism, about privilege, about discrimination, like, this is so detrimental and so hurtful because it's not our place to get somebody to see the other perspective. The least that we can do is be there and listen with curiosity and keeping in mind that this is their experience. Because the moment we try to teach a lesson or educate someone that is sharing something like this, we make it about ourselves and we take away what they're trying to work through.
Yeah.
And that's just not cool.
Yeah.
Put it quite plainly, it's not
Right.
cool.
Not empathetic or not active listening. It's like when you go to a friend who you're pouring your heart out to them and they go, oh my God, that reminds me about the time, but da 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 da. And then you're like, oh man. And then 30 minutes later, your story has been completely forgotten. And now it's about them. You're like, okay, well, I guess not.
Mhm.
It's kind of similar to that on a much grander scale.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, I'm getting stuck in the details here. So let's fast forward a little bit. Okay, this conversation's going on. I've now expressed this. Now someone has told me that it was probably just a mistake. I feel crushed. And at this point, one of the people in the group validated my experience and added that there was the possibility that this individual was unaware that their lighter skin tone may be a possible reason why she wasn't getting it. And it was done in a very gentle way. I felt was done in a very gentle way. It wasn't like, oh, well, you're white, or, it wasn't done that way. It was done in a very gentle way. And at this point, there hasn't been any interventions, any guidance from any leadership to say, okay, let's process this, or how can we do this? This is all very delicate. So I felt like I was a sinking ship at this point. I was like, oh, okay, so this is actually not safe to share. Anyways, I'm getting caught in the details. If you fast forward, what I remember then being asked to do is to stay back because I needed to work through some stuff, because me bringing this up in the session could be my things that I need to deal with. And
When that's the whole point of this group, mind you. To process the things that may impact us as humans, therefore, as a healer, as a therapist. That's the whole point of this group.
And being Latinx. That was also
right, because this is a specific Latinx group.
Yeah.
It's like, so where are you supposed to work it out?
Yeah, like, okay, so now I'm like, oh, wow. So, and my doubt crept in. It did. I'm not gonna lie. It was like, okay, so am I making it up? Is this, because it's so scary to speak up and say when this kind of stuff is happening, because you don't know if you're actually safe. You don't know if, like, I could have been like, well, you know what, you are now the problem. If we just get rid of you, then we don't have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt really bad about everything, about sharing, about all these things. At the same time, it further validated how big the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And how much work we have left to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Just in the reaction of how that was handled, instead of you being met with compassion and empathy for your experience, you were then essentially told, no, that's not what it was.
I was referred to look into therapy services. I was already seeing a therapist at the time, but I was kind of like, okay.
And I get how that can be valuable to then for somebody to say, hey, it sounds like there's a lot happening here, that it could be helpful for you to speak with somebody to really dig deep here and work through these pains. And gosh, life is hard, so what can I do to help you? And let's see about finding someone that can help work with you on this. So there's value in that as a response. But I feel, and let me know if I'm wrong, if the response is, you got issues, you need to go somewhere else, and therefore, like, do it out there, it has no place here. Whereas when we're talking about privilege, racism, colorism, all of the above, you can't just put that somewhere else. It happens everywhere, right? So then to say that this isn't the place for us to process this, I feel like that's really hurtful.
Yeah.
And
I
dismissive.
think it could be both. I think, maybe this person, that was the capacity that they could provide support. There's a tons of reasonings, I think, for sure. And I think what was within their reach was to provide a referral. And so, I mean, I guess looking at this as a clinician, I'm like, okay, well, that's good. You're providing a resource. That's helpful. But that doesn't take away from the systemic issue that was so clear, and then was just kind of shut down. And I don't know if, it had to do something with like connections or being in power, or I'm sure it came into play. And as I'm sharing all of this, one thing that's coming up for me right now is, yes, all this is happening, and I'm also aware that I'm privileged in many ways. Like, I'm in this setting of higher education. My parents did receive their citizenship eventually, and that now makes it feel to where, okay, now I have some safety to be able to speak up. And so I'm privileged in those ways where I can use my voice. I can use my place in the world to make an impact. And I know that not everyone is in that place. And so I just had to note that because I felt that.
Yeah, and I know it's not about excusing someone or, hearing you talk about how you were affected and how you were mistreated and not heard. Of course, I come up and want to have your back and support you, and that may come out as ready to fight,
Watch us.
And I'm like, whoa, excuse me? Right.
Ahorita.
And also, like you were talking about, right, they're the threads of how far this goes. So not only is there you in this situation and where you are in your life, but also where this supervisor or leader is in their life and everything that comes with them. So you hinted at earlier, you said about forgiveness. And for me, it's like forgiving yet not forgetting. And so forgiveness does not mean accepting, right? So for me, that's how I see this, and that if to be mistreated, I'm not accepting the mistreatment. I may forgive where this person was in this time and place and the resources and what they had to access. So maybe what that played out as not being very helpful in the moment, right? They could have been flustered. Maybe they just were confused, caught off guard, right? They're like, I'm not prepared for this. I don't know what to do. And I'm just going to throw this somewhere else and excuse myself, right? So compassion and forgiveness doesn't mean I'm accepting and saying that was okay, but I'm forgiving that moment, and I'm going to, say, all right, that was what it was at that time. And yes, it could have been different. But now what can I do with what I have now? And I'm just going to hope that that person is in a better place here on this earth, a better place to deal with these kind of situations.
Yeah, this is why I get so excited when I see therapists that are doing the work, like it's one thing to get a certification, but if you're doing the internal work and I know we're talking a lot about it in sort of a clinical sense right now, but this is such a big part of us evolving as humans, is where are we at with our awareness of privilege? Where are we at when it comes to cultural awareness? How do I feel about these things? Where do I stand? What are my values surrounding this topic? Because some people never even cover these things, and they go about making actions, saying things, causing harm. And it may not be with the intention to cause harm, but the impact has detrimental effects.
Yeah. And that's what it's about right there. The impact, all of those ripple effects, being willing to hear someone out just to listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't make it about you. Hear them out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I know there's also a tendency sometimes to feel as if we are the ones that have to do the teaching. Or we might be cornered to be the ones to take care of somebody else's work. And that to me always signals boundary. I see just a flashing word, boundary. Because sometimes I have had experience where it's like, oh, I wasn't judging you because you're brown, or it wasn't because of your accent, or I have so and so is Mexican, so I could not possibly be discriminating you, or
Right. I have friends.
yeah, or like I can't be racist because it's it. Like I'm, my great grandmother was Mexican or brown or black or whatever it is, so therefore I'm not. Like, no, this could not be further from the truth. We have to do the work. It's ongoing. We never will know everything, but we can continue to grow and evolve. And if we think that if we don't touch this topic or that it's not necessary, we're missing out on this huge potential to be more connected, more deeply connected to each other, with love and respect and embrace.
I feel like it's so much more than I have words for right now. These are the times when I feel like not educated enough, not, what's the word? What is the word?
Word. What's the word?
What's the word? Word. What's the word? Eloquent, is it? No, what's the other word? What's it? And I'm clearly not doing it
Articulating.
Right now. Articulating, yes.
I think we just made up a game. I want to emphasize that allow yourself to educate the other individual, but just know, I'm telling you right here, right now, it is not our or your responsibility to educate others on your culture. You have a choice. And, there are times where you can, and there are times where you are okay to say, I'm not going to do this right now. Again, going back to, the idea of burnout and owning your boundaries and your needs. And I am not saying that we're ignoring it or that it's not important enough, because boy, it is the thing. So what was the outcome? I didn't exactly stay quiet after that. And I laugh because it's almost like with pride, because something awoke in me where I was, enough is enough. I am in a place now where I can address this, and I'm going to do what I can to make sure that it doesn't continue, because I want the future clinicians, the future healers, to believe that it is necessary to do the work, to do the internal work. It is part of the puzzle. We just got to do the work. And the more work that you do for yourself, the deeper your clients will go, the more impact that will have, and not just with our clients, but with each other, out in the world, in our day-to-day. What steps are we taking to make an impact? Maybe for you, it's to do the internal work, and that's what you are providing, and that's 100% okay. And maybe you're doing more and you're out and participating in the movements, and fantastic. You are participating in the movement in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I just really wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I know I'd heard a bit of it before, and still hearing it again, it was like hearing it newly, like it was a new story as new bits came out, and that it was important for me to hear out your experience, and that it was important to hear it because then I know that you're not the only one. I'm not the only one who's ever experienced these things where we just feel like crap based on how we look, based on cultural assumptions, stereotypes. Yeah, so, if you're still listening with us, I really want to thank you for listening to this, that this was not about us putting on an educator hat or saying, here, this is how we solve racism and privilege, and this is how it's experienced in all of Latinx communities. That's not how we approached this or would ever want to think of doing this kind of a topic or conversation, but more about listening to each other, and really being there and validating each other's experiences, and acknowledging that there's just a lot to be done. I also want to try and be hopeful. It's hard to be hopeful with everything that's happening and how it plays out in the news for us. My heart goes out to everybody, and I know that at times that just does not feel like enough. So really sending my love to you, and take care of yourselves. We want you to take care of yourselves as best as you can and protect your energy. I feel like a broken record, but I almost say it to myself. Your experiences are valid, they're important, and your voice matters. So let's just keep going.
Thank you, Denisse, for listening to me actively and for always just being so present. I know that you sometimes feel like, oh, I wanted to say this, like after the fact you'll tell me like, oh, I wanted to say this, or but I think that you undermine the power that you have when you show up and are fully present to me existing, or to anyone, I am sure. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and supporting our show and continuing to be with us here today. We love you. Un beso.
Beso. We thank you for sharing your time with us and for listening to the Love and Evolve podcast, where we share tools, resources, and education on topics that cover holistic wellness, encompassing mind, body, and spirit.
Find details on how to stay connected with us in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Les damos un fuerte y enorme abrazo. Mwah.
Mwah.